So I would like to introduce a consulting department, and we make dozens of audits per year with our clients. And we see this salad of solutions, processes, technologies, approaches to management, which are built differently, and honestly, they don't work together. And this problem is coming from two reasons. First of all, the company was growing, was made more and more complicated. We had new technological solutions, which, as a rule, follow the umbrella effect. Different vendors which are not friends to each other, they had different TCO teams with their policies, their approaches to management. And the reason number two, big holdings or ecosystems that we work with, and they need to buy new subsidiaries in M&A processes, and we need to new pools of solutions, and we have to work with them. The companies are growing, becoming more complicated. The IT department is becoming more complicated, but as the system, we get package of packages, which is very difficult to scale, and these problems have to be solved by cybersecurity department. Why? We are speaking about it again, and why this track is so popular, because we've been listening a lot to it. You know, the colleagues from IT are going through the digital transformation, IT infrastructure. They've been doing it 10 years ago. They're doing it right now. So why are we speaking about it once again? To my point of view, business has to find a way to connect common technologies and approaches available in the market with the consideration of those capabilities and limitations that we feel upon ourselves. And other limitations, I mean, the story with import substitution, the difficulty of finding people, difficult economical situation. Usually, those companies that we've been working with and who try to build this cybersecurity system, they want to solve the following three big problems. The first one, digital transformation. When we enter into the reconstruction of IT process, and we work with IT teams together so that we wouldn't have these vessel when the IT is up. Then holdings and ecosystems, which have to be purchased by the business, and they have to be sold also. So we have to understand what's going to be centralized, what's going to be local, what's going to be provided by PD services. So there should be a hybrid single architecture within the holding. And the final thing, even the first thing, those methods which are used right now, they show its non-efficiency. And you see that some companies, they encrypt into iterations, and you need global reconstruction to solve this problem. When you're a small company, you're not going to think about architecture. You have the final points. You're going to be closing them by IDR. You have web. You will close it by WAP. But when you scale, you have the growth problem of big companies, which has to be solved by architecture. So let's dive into the theory. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult to understand our presentation, and it's a different audience, and different CISOs understand architecture differently, and they understand it's like that, like a control list of solutions which have to be realized. And realization of this infrastructure, it's a realization of this list. Obviously, if you have some solutions, it doesn't mean that you have a building. Well, you just have bricks, which can be laid in different things, and you can build different buildings with different layers. Depending on the context, you are going to build this house. So everything is the same applied to the architecture. This is the carcass where practices should work together. They should be throughput, so it wouldn't be one level. You have to properly, and you have to balance them properly, because if we implement only and forget about predict and recover, then you will have one-legged architecture. But if you will dig deeper, this architecture should give us process and tools to, first of all, see the general plan that we would like to build. The second, we should go on a step-by-step basis, select processes, technologies, management blocks, and the method, not on 3P, but depending on the context that you are building. And the final, we should give to the business the measurement tool that will be understand maturity, measurement matrix, so that we understand what the money was given for. And we have to answer a lot of questions. And some of these questions I'll be verbalized in this slide. I'm not going to read them, but you can answer them by yourself. And we are going to come back to these questions a little bit later.
нам помогут архитектурные фреймворки.
Architectural frameworks will help us to go to this cycle. You shouldn't invent the wheel. It exists a long time. It should be used for building the architecture. Architectural frameworks are multi-level ones. Each level is an abstraction level. And looking at these levels will help us to build the architecture from small to big and physical implementation. And popular frameworks of Oracle ES, SAPs allow us to go through these processes of building infrastructure of general plan to implementation of specific protection measures. In the framework of my presentation, we will look at the framework SAPs. In order not to be empty-worded, the architecture on different levels of representation, general plan level on the left, separate buildings in the center, and composition level on the right. Okay, let's look at what are we going to build in Russian companies and what they were building several years ago. In cybersecurity world, there are several architectural models which are known to each one of you. And any company, when they start building it, they build from it, even they don't know how to methodologically build it, because these models are intuitively understandable to business and understandable to everybody. And I will go through each one of them. I'm not going to stop at each one, but castle and moat, defense and depth, zero trust. Castle mode, it's the first one that people use to build. Outside everybody is bad, inside everybody is good. It's a perimeter protection. And there was a research where they were telling that state authorities very often look at this model. The next model is extremely popular. It was reflected in all international standards, this multi-levelness, where we try to prevent criminals or slow them down at different vectors of attack when they are moving inside of our infrastructure. And zero trust is the best model. We are going to speak about it separately. So I'm heading the analytical department, and we, in the course of the last 2 years, we are talking to the security people, and this research in the course of 2 years, we have been speaking to more than 150 TCOs. What are they building? We've been asking them, and half of them are on defense to depth, some of them castle to moat, and zero trust. Only a few of them go in this direction. But business right now needs to determine which architectural model they should use and how to should they select the proper direction and good quality quantumly, because if they don't have the program product on which they can build it, it's understandable that they need to go away from castle and moat. It's very bad. Well, defense in depth, many build it. However, it does have its limitations. It's a positive model. Multi-level is not eternal. And zero test, it's the best one, but it requires technological maturity. It requires proper infrastructure, segmentation of microperimeters, preparation of applications, so that local density would work properly. So globally, zero trust is a good way, and many companies realize different let's say different elements of this zero trust, but even in foreign sources, not many companies have reached this architecture. So with consideration of this data that we've been telling you, many of them, they go for creation of hybrid or transient architecture when we use pluses and minuses of different models. For example, we take scaled approach, and then we use zero trust and some other models, and then by looking at these architectures together with serial, we have selected some requirements they have to comply with. I'm not going to read all of them, but I will speak about three, the most important ones. Number one, this model should be integrated with IT. It shouldn't be hanging in the air. Second of all, it should be definitely active and not passive. And we should understand who should attack us. And third one, it should be business-oriented. It should be based on business requirements. So if we protect retail, we are not going to use the castle mode, because we should work with those clients. And another slide, available methodologies that can be used. You know all these methodologies, and I would recommend to you, especially, please pay attention to Garda Adaptive Security Architecture. It's a very great approach, because they operate with functions when protection measures can be divided into piles, and that's how you can balance your infrastructure. But we will go to the most complicated one, methodology of building the hybrid architecture. Cyril, the floor is yours. One of the most interesting frameworks that allows us to get with this objective is SABSA. SABSA is Shared Applied Business Security Architecture. It's a structure and methodology of building architecture of informational security oriented at business requirements. In this model, security is looked at as the mean of protecting business functions and not just a set of limitations. In the basis of this methodology is a downwards approach, which starts from defining business goals of the companies and creates the links of follow-up on all levels of traceability. All the main peculiarity of this model you can see on this slide. One of the most important advantages of SABS is the fact that this model is integrated with popular frameworks of building like TAGAF. And complexities between integration of the infrastructure of IT and information security, their levels are equalized. There's a lot of documentation where this integration is described. So we will share it with you within our presentation in the end of it. Informational security architecture, according to international standards, like qubit NIST, consists of three main domains: people, processes, and technologies. And effective infrastructure building is impossible without all three domains. In the framework of our presentation, we're going to look at building architecture of informational security for the main technology. And on the level of representation, we are going to speak in more detail on which one of them includes. Building information security looks like a house construction. We define how this building is going to look, in which conditions it's going to be built, and it's completed by practical questions like what wallpaper should be selected, what type of cement should be used, etc. In case of information security architecture, its construction begins with defining business goals of the company and their parameters, and it ends up with implementation of specific means of protection with specific settings. The information security architecture, according to SABS methodology, is bidirectional, from business goals to full list of means of protection that are needed for their support, and in reverse direction, from specific means of protection to specific business goals, which have to be protected by them. I will tell you in more detail about context and conceptual levels. On these levels, we define business context of the organization, business goals and their parameters, and risks for their achievement. On these two levels, we define foundation of agreement between business goals and means of protection. Also, it's important to speak that selection of specific means of protection and products has to be done only after approval of the results for these two levels with all the interested stakeholders. And this is one of the most important details of the SABS methodology. Let's speak from the context level. On the level of the context, we determine parameters like business goals and their parameters, interest stakeholders, requirements, the plans of development of the infrastructure, and other high-level requirements, which have to be taken into consideration at all levels of building this architecture. Let's move to the conceptual level. We are making the blueprint of our future house. We define the architectural principles, which are going to show us how our building is going to look like, and then we determine risks for the business goals, which show us which external influences our house should be able to withstand to. In a part of defining the risks, we are going to speak about two methodologies. How can this be done? We're going to tell you about the method of business attributes of SABS, and also we're going to tell you about threat method with micro methodology in more detail. In the framework of this presentation, we're going to speak about micro methodology because within our projects we meet it more and more often. Architectural principles, it's a constitution of building the security system. The simpler they sound, the better it is. They have to be understandable to all the stakeholders, from engineers and all the way to the managers and top managers. And I can make an example of several basic architectural principles like scaled protection, everything which is not permitted is prohibited, also following the balance between protecting informational systems and their business functions. In order to effectively develop these architectural principles, we recommend to look at the completed principles which exist in the international standards, apply to the context of the organization, and receive those principles which are relevant to your architectures. The documentation which is contained in those architectural principles will show it to you during our presentation. Let's speak about risk determination, and let's begin with SAP's business attributes. Business attributes are in the foundation of SAP's methodology, and they are used to determine the health of the information security architecture to the goals of the company. This method is good that you can use not only for the building of the information security architecture, but in all levels of life. I will tell you about its main peculiarities. Let's imagine that you have high-level business goal. For its achievement, you need to follow several sub-goals and business drivers. In order to determine in which condition these sub-goals are, you introduce business attributes, and for these business attributes, you determine both positive and negative risks. Positive and negative risks are one of the peculiarities of SAP's methodology, and a little bit later I will give you examples of it. And in the future, the means of protection and level below, they are used to influence risks and business attributes. Let's speak on the example of the telecom company. They have a high-level goal to provide stable growth of the profit and base of users, and we have followed several business drivers. If we make an example of one of the business drivers, the client satisfaction, then to determine these, we define several business attributes. If we take as an example one of the attributes of sustainability, we determine risks which are negatively influencing this attribute and risks which influence it positively. Negative risk can be DDoS attacks or failures of the equipment. Risk which can positively influence this attribute, distributed data centers, and means of protection that we determine on lower levels. They will be used to influence these risks. For example, the means of protection from DDoS attacks will be used to influence the risks of a sustainability attribute. This attribute has several advantages and disadvantages. One of the main advantages is something that it allows us to get more precise equalization between the goals of the business and infrastructure of information security. But in real life, we see that not all companies have determined these business goals, and it's not possible to be done. So as an alternative, we use MITRE methodology to define risks. And I'm going to tell you about it, and Cyril is right that he's saying that you need the attributes for small companies. It's not like that. We often work with businesses where there's no understanding or where the company is moving to.
That's why it would be very complex to use the method like that. Of course, every methodology can be adapted. So we're using MITRE metrics, and we have to ensure focus. We should not spread it thin across the infrastructure. We have to understand what should be the primary target for protection. You can use different frameworks, these unauthorized events, whatever. We are going to use MITRE attack because it's a technical framework, identifying attackers in different environments, and that's why I'm going to dwell on MITRE. And what methodology we use? You know that MITRE is basically like a matrix. It tells us what kind of techniques the attackers are using for hacking or persistence. Two more methodologies. This would be debt profiling, and from MITRE Engineering, this is R&D Center, which is putting out a lot of products working with MITRE. So this is like a multi-layer approach, and I'm going to be very brief about that. It's much more complex than what I will be able to tell you about right now. And basically, let's say there's a company, there are 3 layers or threats we have to pay attention to. One would be the direct threats against the company. No doubts, we've had them before. We know how to monitor for those threats. This would be unauthorized events for business. We are taking this as a high priority, and we're making like a navigator, and we give him the highest coefficient. The second threat would be what is applicable to our company as a context, like where we are, what would be, who is attacking our competition, and here we are making the second layer with a less amount of coefficients. And third one would be statistical threats happening everywhere. We simply cannot ignore them, the encryption and ransomware and so on. And at this stage, we use different additional MyTree technologies, and by this multiplication of layers, we get these kind of maps that we can use with. It's depersonalized and anonymized, and you can get this kind of tables, like a method of techniques and solutions. So let's dive deeper. And finally, we come to the technological solutions. We basically have gone through this level of abstractions, like what has to be done and why. And now we move to specific solutions for each layer. It's a multi-layer thing, and many models are multi-layer. So globally, we have 2 stages: identify those layers, and secondly, provide solutions. First, about layers. A previous speaker, he or she was saying about the TOGAF and Archimedes and other things. If you remember TOGAF, they also have a layer: motivation, business, technological layer, which you can deploy from within. And most of the architectural methods, like a tiered, layered defense, you can see that basically there's like a throughput layers for codifications and different standards. But basically, it's like a throughput thing. It's an end-to-end. You have the policies, and we have like a sandwich. You have to cover it with a layer of security: IB, information security, IT, and this is the example of technological layers that we should have in our architecture. And then we fill them up with solutions, answering the question what these solutions should be depending on the context you and I have predefined. This could be the regulators and partners and businesses and techniques which we've identified before. We answer the question like why. And if we're going to do this kind of projects for the major holdings, we have a unified and integrated InfoSec architecture which becomes standardized, and then we're using it within our holding company. And we make things like very orderly, and we adapt it depending on what technologies we use. Like you can take it off like an onion layer by layer depending on the needs. But today we know what type of solutions we should have, not only as a headquarters but also our regional companies. One level lower, let's go there. It's a physical level. These are templates, and those, ISTs, they are working in between, they're communicating with different infrastructure, and they are used for specific information security challenges. And to work on these kind of challenges, we use architectural templates, standardized solutions. And these templates have been used for many years, like TOGAF is used in that. But also in InfoSec field, we can see that instead of using standardization, people are trying to reinvent the wheel, so to say. Just imagine that a company which has a lot of subsidiaries, that this company will be using, publishing services on the internet in all different ways instead of one standardized solution. Eventually, the outcome in different subsidiaries, depending on the skills and how they understand the challenge, they may have a totally different situations, and that's why we use architectural standardized templates. In terminologies of TOGAF, this would be an architectural block. An architectural block or template does not depend on specific products or specific solutions. We identified on the one lower level. And finally, we moved on to component level of the InfoSec architecture representation. This would be the lowest level. We identify specific products which would be the right fit for us depending on our standards, depending on functional requirements of the architectural templates. And then we have the process of design and implementations. Implementation and design, we use this standard methodology. I'm not going to dwell on that, and those of you who have dealt with this, you know. But when implementing architectures, we do it sequentially. And to understand this sequence, we use a maturity model, which is developed for each unique architecture. And the architecture, its build-up does not stop with implementation, because you always have to understand that architecture is going to be efficient, and you have to know that it matches business goals and purposes. And you use metrics for that. We're going to give you more details about metrics and maturity model. Yeah, so we're moving towards the end of our presentation right now. So we've gone through basically the cycle of building architecture. Now let's talk about measurements. We are using two main tools, and basically this is the maturity evaluations and metrics. They're two different things. Maturity is about how we build up our function, like how do we grow, and metrics are saying how efficiently we do that. So the maturity may say that we've implemented, a new solution which had to be done. Metrics are saying what will be the coverage area with these solutions, covering the number of endpoints. And basically, speaking of the zero trust model, there are different kinds of models, different kind of documents. And for the modern architectures, certain maturity models have been developed which are helping to set your priorities straight and say what you're going to do the first, second, and third. Because there are many solutions, but where do you begin? That's the question. For our projects, we are developing this kind of maturity tools where sequentially you can build up your architecture, and usually you're using this kind of visuals, Dandelion they call it, where you can look like how you move. And metrics, they show the efficiency of what has been implemented on each level. We recommend using no more than 2 metrics, 3 metrics per layer per solution. If you don't know how to calculate your metrics, start small with a small scope, because without the automation, it's gonna take you a long time. Summing up, what we've been discussing today, we've looked into what architecture is all about. It is not just a list of control solutions that you can implement. We also covered or have shown what kind of architectures are being built by modern companies, what is like a transitional or hybrid architecture. We've checked on the methodologies of the apps from the top level and down to the physical or component level. Basically, we've touched upon all the questions or issues you can see on the slide. Once again, you can look at them. Once again, you can ask yourself, like, how am I doing about that? And what are we going to do this right now? It's a call to action. We got to understand what kind of problems I'm feeling with my architecture. Maybe you have some problems with the scalability and flexibility. And secondly, you have to identify whether your current architecture has been integrated into your business and IT, or just how applicable it is. Next is to go through top-down and to understand what you may have forgotten at each level, and like you want to use this right now, what do you want to apply, and also to make a decision. To go into restructuring of the architecture or work on the problems as they come. We prepare some additional materials for you about architecture because, again, the presentation is over right now, and I can see the stop sign. Yeah, we have lots of info for you. Use this QR code and join our community, Cybercamp. Ask your questions. Let's discuss it. Let's talk about architecture because this is like super interesting. Thanks a lot. Thank you for your attention.
Спасибо, коллеги. Давайте, наверное, один вопрос, если есть какой-то из зала.
Let's do just one question, if we have any. And if there will be any additional questions, you'll always be able to find people in the audience and presenters and be able to talk with them on the sidelines personally.
Вопрос в середине зала.
Yeah, I can say the mic. Please, go ahead. Hello, my name is Dmitry again. It all sounds great. But in your company, have you already implemented this technology and this architecture? You know, as for ourselves, we are with our information security center. We also have the implementation center when we go with our clients to this kind of product. Within the company, we decided from the top tier, orientation, context, and conceptuals, but globally right now, we do this in our company, yes, indeed. But again, it's not a fast process. What we've told you usually takes about a year to make it a reality, and even 1 year is very fast, given that you have to spend so many resources. But again, it's about your team, right? It's about your expertise. And since our company, we're an integrator, we can take resources from within. We can basically share the expertise of our manufacturing facilities. So it's much easier than if a certain company is going to do it on their own, like an industrial holding beat or any ecosystem. Usually they're trying to find expertise on the market to just speed it up and make it easier. And my final question is about the number of successful implementations. How many cases do you have? Speaking about the top-down, this would be 2 implementations. But like I said before, that we are looking only technological layer because there is also the process block and also the functional block. And also we begin, speaking about the processes, this would be the model and then different notations and developing whatever. And then if we're speaking about the staff number, we talk about the staff structures, development for it, and functional models for each of the employees. And here the separate moments, like sometimes our clients are saying that you have to build only process part, and this is what we do every year with many of our clients. Other clients are saying I need only functional block. And if we do it from A to Z, of course there are more complicated projects. Speaking about the block by block, we can do it all the time. Thanks a lot. I thank you, dear colleagues, and Kirill and Alexander. Let's move on to the next presentation.